Begin the current daf, Masechtes Nazir Daf Yud Ches, begin 14 lines down at the top of the Amid, where the Gemara parenthetically explains a Tana that was mentioned in the previous daf. We mentioned this brisa a few times because of as a raya between the machlekes that we had in the Gemara of Rabbi Yechon or Shlakish. If a person, which was the case of the previous Mishnah, if someone took a Naziris in the basic Kvalis, if it's Chal or not, that was the first version of the Machlekes, and then we used that brisa to ask on that, on Rish Lakish. And the second version of the Machlekes was, I mean, it's Chal. The question is, do you get lashes on the Tumah? And with that, we used the brisa again to ask on Rish Lakish. And then the Gemara just goes and explains who's the Tana of the brisa, which gets us into interesting conversation in the Machlekes regarding when does this Naziris of Tahara resume after the Tumah. Something to discuss in today's daf are Chalais Nazir, the Nazir Tahar, like we said, which is, we know that when the person that's a Nazir becomes Tameh, so it's Hayom Rishon Yiplu, the first days they fall by the wayside, then you got to start over again. When does it actually resume? Does it start on the day when he purifies himself, or on the following day when he actually brings his Karban? The case of Nazir Shnitma Tumas Harba, the Gemara brings an interesting case that you could have, generally what happens is a person becomes Tameh, as a Nazir, he has to purify himself, and he brings karbanos. There is a possibility that you have many tumais, and you're only going to bring one carbon of tahara, which is interesting because every time you really have to bring a new carbon, and if it's during the days of tumah, then it's not a new tumah. So now we're going to see, depending on when again the naziris the tahara starts, and when there's the karbanos, that you might actually have a new tumah at the same time it be included in the same previous carbon, which that also relates to Laila Mechuzasman, which is regarding that the halacha. The discussion, if you say that with the day that you could bring your carbon, but it's halachically the day, because the day starts at nighttime, but technically you're only allowed to bring a carbon b'yoyim tzavaisa on during the daytime. So do we say that nighttime is mechutz zman, that it's not yet the time, or it is the time, it's just a technicality that you can't bring it? So we begin the current daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, 14 lines down at the top of the Yamin. We had quoted this brisa in the past. Now the Gemara wants to know man Tana. Who's the Tana or the Tana Rabbanan that we learned in a brisa? We quoted this on the previous daf. The brisa said like this: Ein bein tamei shenazar. There's no difference between a tamei person who took a naziris while he was tamei. L'nazar tahar shenitma, to a tar nazar who became tamei. No difference between them in their halachas. They're all going to have the same halacha. And the one difference is shetamei shenazar. A tamei person that took his naziris while he was tamei. We explained this exactly why, because he doesn't have halacha of being a carbon. That was the halacha of a previous Mishnah, that the halacha is mimayit, a carbon, it's only if it's when he was tar. So his 7th day is going to be already day 1 of his counting of his new naziris, whereas a nazir tar shnitma, regarding a tar nazir that became tamei, his 7th day is not going to be counted because you're not starting then. You have to wait till the next day when you bring your karbanas. Now that's a machlokes. Amr Rav Chizdi says, you know what? This is not like everyone. We were assuming a concept, but it's actually Rebbe here, because the Amr Rebbe says, "Ein naziris tarachala," in a regular guy, in a regular nazir who becomes tamei, who was tar and then became tamei. His naziris of tara does not start over again ela ad shemini, only until day 8, which is when he brings his karbanos. Because the item Rabbi Yehudi, if you say it's like the other Tana we're going to quote in a moment. Ha'amar, he says, no, Nazir's the Tahara, Mishvihu the Chayla. So then there's no difference between a Tamei Shenazir and a Nazir Tahar Shenitma. They're both is Shvi, is Min HaMinyan. It's going to be day 1 of starting your Nazir. Okay, so Rav Chizda pointed out to us that this brisa we quoted a few times is actually only like Rebbe and not Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, my Rebbe and my Rabbi Yehuda. What is this machlokes that you're referring to that is this source? The time like Linda brisa. Pasuk says in Midbar, the beginning of the pasuk says the kohen is going to make one as a chatas, one as a oila, and he's going to atone for this guy who sinned by coming in contact with a dead person. And the pasuk says the kiddush as roishai bayemahu. Kiddush roishai, as I said previously explained, means the gidul sar, meaning you're going to start growing your hair now on that day, meaning you're going to start counting your new naziris. What is that day that you start counting your new naziris? So it's a machlokes. The first opinion says bayom havaz karbanaisav. On the day when he brings his karbanos, that's the Rebbe, because that's what it says in the pasuk. It says by Yom HaShmini on the 8th day he's going to bring his 2 turtle doves, etc. And then it says v'chipolav mashachat al nefesh v'kiddush reish b'yemahu. So we learned that that's on day 8, which is when he brings his kabbanis, as Gemara will explain later, because that's what the pasuk says. It says on day 8 bringing kabbanis, and then it says v'kiddush reish. So Rebbe says that's when you start over again. That's like the time of the Brisa that we quoted a few times on the previous daf. He says no, it's b'yom tiglach day. The pasuk's talking about the day that he cuts off his hair, which is day 7, as we're going to explain shortly. That is when he starts over. He disagrees with the halacha that brisa without a rebbe. Now, so Rav Chizda had said that this brisa we quoted a few times previous up is like rebbe. However, but this that we learned in the Mishnah in the first paragraph increases on the test Omer Aleph. That actually, when it says the following halacha, Nazir shenitma tumas harba. If you have a nazir that became tummy with many different tummies, it wasn't just one time. There's halacha that any maybe have a carbon echad. You could have it as a situation that you only bring one carbon. Man Tana, who's that Tana? Rav Chizda says, oh, that Tana? That's Rabbi Yisrael Yehuda. Not like Rabbi. Why? Why is it like Rabbi Yisrael Yehuda? Because Dama, he says, as we just mentioned before, Nazira is Tahara. You're purifying Naziras Mishvi Chayla. Starts from the 7th day, is when you start counting your new Naziras. Okay, so what? Mishkachas. So I could have a case where you can have many tumas with one carbon. How so? What would the case be? Kugain Shenitma Bishvi. The guy became Tameh on his 7th day of purification. And again became Tameh at the end of 7 days. After he already sprayed himself and repeated himself on day 3 and day 7, he tabled the mikvah. And right after he sprayed and he went to the mikvah, at that point, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it takes effect on him the Naziris of Tahara. Because he says the day 7 is from the counting of the new 30 days. So when you become Tamei on day 7, since it already took effect on you the Naziris of Tahara, it's already considered like another Tumah. It's not like becoming Tamei on day 6, which that's of course just what's called a Tumah Richta. That wouldn't be a new Tumah. You never purified yourself on day 6. You didn't have a new Naziris of Tahara. So wait a second. But still you could exempt yourself with one carbon of Tumah, because Mani, who is the Tana? Yehudi. Because Kivin, since he became Tumah on day 7. But the Loyatza Shaharui Lahevi carbon, he never came to a day that would be fit for him to bring a carbon, which is only on day 8. So then in the Chavel carbon echad, it's not, you never had a new liability of a carbon. You were still within the framework of the first obligation. So this time the Mishnah agrees must be like Rabbi Yossi but Rabbi Yehuda, where you could have such a case formulation of a new Tumah, because day 7 he holds you start again, but it's still one carbon. Because as the Gemara says, if you would think that the Mishnah would do like Rabbi, who he says that no, you don't start the Naziz and Tahara until day 8. Wait a second. It doesn't really make sense. Because if you're going to pick the same case we just described here, Yehuda, that the guy was Tameh, he's purifying himself, he's going to the Paraduma ashes, day 3, day 7, he goes to Mikvah, day 7. And then on day 7 he goes and becomes Tameh again. And becomes Tameh again on day 7. The problem is, Kul Tumah Rechtehi. It's all considered as one long Tumah. Because he never came to a situation yet of starting as Naziris. It's, as I said, becoming Tameh day 6. Why would you call it Tumah's Harbor? And the Eden it B'Shmini, and if you're going to say no, he became Tameh day 8. That according to the Rebbe is when you start the new Naziris, so it could be considered a new Tumah. B'Chazan and B'Shmini, again you come Tameh day 8 and so on and so forth. But that's problematic because he already came to a time where it'd be fit for him to bring a carbon, and since you already came there, it's almost like as if you came Tameh after bringing the carbon. Meaning, of course, you have to bring a new carbon of Tumah. Because it's a new obligation. You already were able to. You already had that chiyuv. In other words, when you cut the morning of the 8th day, you already have the chiyuv. Now you come tell me again, it's a new chiyuv. So why would you say you only bring one carbon?
Well, because he can't bring a carbon.
No, day 8 that you were able to bring a carbon.
No, he was able, but because he didn't, and he became Tameh.
But that's a new Tumah because your new Nazir starts on day 8, and it's a new chiyuv of carbon also because you were able to bring a carbon. It's a new chiyuv. Versus day 7 that you weren't able to bring it yet. So it makes sense according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda you come Torah on day 7, but you didn't have a Chiyuv Karban yet. But according to the Rebbe, it doesn't make sense. So says Rav Chisda must be that just like I said, the previous Bryce says like Rebbe, this Bryce must be like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, that's the sourcing of these two Tanot. It says the Gemara, my time the Rebbe. What's the reason of Rebbe for this halacha that he holds that the Nazirus of Tahar is not going to take effect only until the day when he brings his Karbanos, meaning of day 8? So he says, Makra, what do you mean? The very simple reading of the Pasuk seems to indicate like that. The Pasuk says, V'chiper alav, it's talking about over there that by Yom HaShemini, on the 8th day, that he's going to atone for him, Ma'ashachat al Nefesh, that he became Tameh from coming in contact with a dead person. And then in that same Pasuk, right away, it says, V'kiddush Esrei, that he's going to sanctify his head, and it says, by Yom on that day, in other words, on the day when they had atonement, which is on the 8th day. So seemingly very clearly it says V'kiddush Reishai that your restarting of the Nazir is going to be on the 8th day. So what's Pshat Reis Yehuda? Says the Gemara in Cain, if that would be the case, he says no. Lei Makra, the pasuk should just say V'kiddush Ez Reishai, and I would know it's going on the 8th day because that's what the context of the pasuk already said. But as we continue to Talmud Beis, by Yaimahu Lamali, what's Yenatog? What's Yenatog? What Yenatog? Of course it's Yenatog. I already said it's the 8th day. So the words by Yemahu are superfluous. They tell me if Ein Lishmi, if it's not teaching me anything regarding the 8th day, today Ein Lishmi, it's coming to teach me something regarding the 7th day, which is extra word to say by Yemahu is an underdog. It's an extra day, a day earlier. On day 7 is the day when you're going to start over your Naziras of Tahara. So that's the machlekes. Now the Gemara asks each one according to the other one's sourcing. Rebbe Nami, Haksib by Yemahu. What do you mean? The words by Yom seem to be extra. What do you need it for? Of course I know it's going the 8th day. If you're telling me by Yom on that day, that was the 8th day, but I know it's that day. What do you have to say there? So on that Rebbe, I would tell you no. Lahachi hu da asa. The B'yema who is coming to teach you, even if you didn't bring your kabbanis, because the life is simple pshat and pasuk. If you read it like a kid in cheder, it would sound like that the Naziris does not take effect until you get atonement with your oil and your chatas, which it says in the pasuk beforehand. It says v'chiper and whatever, to bring these karbanos, and then it's a kiddush reishai. So you would think, okay, 8th day karban, then the kiddush reishai. But if you didn't have the karbanos, then you can't even start over yet. Now with the extra words by Yemahu is coming to tell us that no, the Nazir depends on the Yom Hashmini, even though you didn't bring your karbanos. But I have to tell you day 7, I'm going to teach you that the day, and you don't even have to bring the karbanos. Now, says the Gemara as follows. Vidav Chisda. My duchke lo'ukme. What was pushing him to explain this Mishnah Krisis, Kebis Yehuda? Remember, we had said that, hey, wait a second. How could you have Tumais Harbe with one carbon? So said Rav Chisda, there's only one possibility, like Kebis Yehuda, which is day 7, day 7, day 7, day 7. So you have many Tumais, but it's all within one carbon because you never had your chalois chiyuv of carbon until the next day. So it's all within that one time frame of that one carbon. But it couldn't be like Rebbe, like we discussed. Says the Gemara, why not? I could find a case that it could be like Rebbe. Lukma kagoin denitma, and Taisa takes the word dechazia. Belel shemini. You could say that the guy became tummy on the night of the 8th day. V'Rebbehi. It's going like Rebbe, you know why? Because you already made it to the 8th day, and therefore your Nazirs of Tahara are taking effect, but before you have a chiba, bring your karbanos, because, and Taisa stresses a little bit more why the Gemara's question is coming right over here. You just told me a second ago that according to Rebbe, you're including from the words Bayemahu that as long as you got to the 8th day, even though you didn't bring your karbanos, then your Nazir time is going to start. So wait a second, the night of the 8th day we know in halacha is already the 8th day. So that's when your Nazir takes effect, because that's part of the 8th day. Now based on what you told me, now the Gemara is asking, wait a second, so then you could say the Mishnah increased like Rebbe. Say the guy became Tameh on the night of the 8th day. Since his Nazir takes effect, you have many Tamas. But still you could examine yourself with one carbon because you never came to a moment yet that's fit to bring karbanos, because the Allah is you cannot bring karbanos at night time, because it says, Bayom Tzavoy says, the Gemara says, Zvachim. So why do you say it's like Rabbi? Says the Gemara, so we could spar, we could infer, we could assume from the fact that Rav Chisda did not say that Mishnah could be like Rabbi. Lema Ksava, shall we say that Rav Chisda holds Leil Yalav Mechuzas Manu, that nighttime is not considered that as if you didn't come yet to the time of that you could bring your karbanas. Meaning, there's obviously a question: how do you qualify the night before a day that you have to bring your carbon? Do you say Mechuzas Man? You're not yet here to the time because you cannot bring a night time? No, it's not Mechuzas Man. You are at that day. Just there's a technicality, you cannot bring a night time. So on that, the Gemara wants to assume that he holds that nighttime is not Mechuzas Man. In other words, like he says, not regarding that you actually sacrifice at nighttime, like, oh, it's not Mechuzas Man, I can bring it right now. No, we just mean that it's like you really came to a moment that you're Ra'u Lahevu Karbanaisav, that you cannot exempt yourself with one carbon. It's a Naya Chiv of carbon, which in the Lamdish way of saying it, your Chiv of carbon starts right now at nighttime. You're already on the 8th day. Your Chiv starts now. And if you become tummy a moment after Tzei Sakarav, you're going to have to bring another carbon. What do you mean? My Chiv starts? I can't bring a carbon at nighttime. Okay, that's a technicality. But your Chiv starts right now. That's if you hold Laila is Lav Mechuzas Man. If you hold Mechuzas Man, no, my Chiv doesn't start till the morning. So let's prove that if Chisda holds nighttime is not Mechuzas Man. Because if it was Mechuzas Man, then I have a great case to say it's even like Rabbi. It became Tumah in the night of the 8th day. His Nazir starts, so it's Tumas Harbe, but there's no Chiv of carbon. It's going to be all one carbon. Avi holds it's not Mechuzas Man. And that says the Gemara, no. Not a good point. Says the Gemara that Amr Rav Ada bar Have says, no, Habaha Talia. They're interdependent. Your Naziris of Tahara, of resuming Naziris, is dependent on when you could bring your carbon. So you cannot say the Mishnah is like Rabbi, as the Gemara explains. No, I can't prove it. Maybe it was Mechuzas Man, not Mechuzas Man. I can't prove it because it holds, as you want to tell me that it's not Mechuzas Man, because I'll show you either way. If you hold that nighttime is considered like you didn't come yet time for your carbon, the Chiv never there, it's all within the first framework, then Amos Mechzil carbon. So then when are you fit to bring a carbon? L'tzafra, in the morning. Then Nazir is Nami Lochal Tzafra, not the way we were assuming in the question. That means to say your Nazir's Dach is also not going to take effect till the morning. Why? What shaykh is? So it's the 8th day. So Tais explains. Because it's the Pasuk says, V'chiper v'kidesh, which tells me at a time when it's fit to bring a carbon, that's when your Nazir's Avtar takes effect. It means to say if you become Tumah in the nighttime, it's not Tumas Harbor, it's one long Tumah because it has to be at the same time of when you roll Lahevu Karbanaisav. So when we were originally saying that Yom HaShmini, Yom HaShmini is already a nighttime. Yeah, but it's only based on because it has to be B'Shosha Ro Lahevi. You don't have to actually bring it within the Yom, it has to be B'Shosha Ro. If you tell me it's Mechuzas Man, so there's Mechuzas Man also for the Naziris. And the Amrit Lili Einu Mechuzas Man, if you tell me nighttime is not considered lacking time, meaning to be considered as if it's a halachically, conceptually a time that you could bring, which is even at nighttime, then the Nazir Zahar also starts at nighttime, and therefore you would be Chayav and Carbon Torah on each and every one. So you wouldn't be able to tell me it's like Rabbi, whether you hold Mechuzas Man or not Mechuzas Man. So I cannot prove to you that Rav Chisda holds Laila La Mechuzas Man. Now the Gemara continues and says Gufa, which Taisus brings, not really to have the Girsa as Gufa, because he says an important klal for Shas. It says throughout Shas, the Girsa of Gufa is only when the Gemara brought a teaching or a brisa initially, and it brought it parenthetically, or then you say Gufa to go back to that member, to that brisa, to like, okay, let's once we mention it, let's get a little deep into that teaching. But this brisa was never brought by the Gemara yet before. It's just similar to the wording the Gemara had brought previously of, do you think you became Tomei on the 7th day and on the 7th day, whatever. So now we're bringing a brisa, so you can't tell me a gufa. Okay, be that as it may, the brisa says like this. Nitna b'shvi. The guy became Tomei on day 7. B'chazav and nitna b'shvi. And again, so he became Tomei. He's purifying himself. Comes Tomei day 7. And again, he purifies himself. Comes Tomei day 7. So says the brisa, "Ein maybe el carbon echad." He's going to bring only one carbon. Now, although the Tana holds that the Naziris of Tahara takes effect from day 7, but since it became Tameh before the 8th day had come, which is the time when it's fit to bring his carbon. So again, like we were explaining all along, you could exempt yourself with one carbon from many different tumas. But if nitma b'shmini, it became tumah the 8th day. Again, he purifies out, and then again on the next time, 8th day, becomes tummy again. Since you really came to a shah that it's a roa lahevi carbon naisav, then maybe carbon al kol echad ve'echad. You're gonna have to bring a carbon for every single one. Now, continues the Tana. Maschil umayna miyad. You start counting right away. That's divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Now, says Taisus, it would sound like the way if you read the Mishnah of the previous, like this last case that we're continuing, it would sound like that. Okay, you became Tamid day 8 and day 8 and day 8. But when you purify yourself, you're going to start right away on the 8th day. But says Taisus, it's not possible to say that, because if his Naziris of Tahara only starts from the 8th day, so when you become Tamid the 8th day, you're actually not demolishing even one day. In other words, you would not be obligated to bring a carbon tumah according to Rabbi Eliezer, as learned in the Mishnah. That Rabbi Eliezer says, "Loy boy bayam," says it cannot be that day itself. Rather, he explains that what Rabbi Eliezer is saying over here is, when he says "Maslamayim miyat," he means from day 7. That's when his Nazirus Tahara takes effect if he had already sprayed himself on Taibul, and then when he had purified himself on when it starts on day 7, meaning you're purifying yourself, right? You're a nazir that was tar, it became tamei, so you're going through you're purifying. Day 3, you get to the paraduma ashes. Day 7 you're already purified, and that's when you're maskal amayim miyad, and then that's what the case was saying. He's nikna bishmini. That's when it's already seiser 2 days, because you already started on day 7. Then you can be chayav a carbon tumah according to Eliezer for each and every one. So Tais is just pointing out that this they were saying that it's going to be chayiv for a carbon on every single one. If it's day 8, what we're quoting Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, that masmayim miyad, it's not masmayim miyad from day 8, it's masmayim miyad from day 7, because Rabbi Eliezer holds you cannot have a steal on day 1. If you're starting over on day 8, you wouldn't be chayav a carbon tumah for each one, because Rabbi Eliezer holds it has to have vayama rishon yiplu. It can't be, has to be at least 2 days that you're being seisa. So he's just pointing out this masmayim miyad, although the simple reading sounds like day 8 is you're starting right away, it's not. It's day 7. Then you got tummy on day 8, so you can have a new carbon tumah for each and every time. What? What do you mean mechusar carbon? No, day 8 is when it became tummy. It was a time it was shah shara lahevi carbon when the gist guy purified himself. So let's say he never brought his karbanis yet. He's trying to purify himself. And day 7, he's starting to count over again. Day 8 is when he brings his karbanis. So he didn't bring it yet, but in the morning of the 8th day, it becomes tummy again. Now it's being saved for 2 days. He's already started counting yesterday and today, and it's already shashara heavy carbon, so it's a new chiyuv of carbon. The moment you already had your chiyuv, and now you become tummy again, it creates a new chiyuv, and a new chiyuv, and a new chiyuv, and a new chiyuv, and a new chiyuv. So you can have a carbon tumah for every single one. Becoming them on day 7, no, there's gonna be all one carbon for all those times because you never got a new chiyuv of carbon. So that's the opinion of Eliezer. Now, however, so according to Eliezer, it's enough as long as you came to the day of the 8th day. But they say, no, carbon echad al halkol. You can still be chayv only one carbon from them all, even if you were b'yem mishmini, achiyavich hatasa. So there's a new opinion that we never had up until now, that the Rabbanan hold that the Naziris of Tahara did not take effect until he brings his carbon chatas. And according to Eliezer, Taisa explained, the Naziris of Tahara starts on day 7, and then if you come to day 8, you'll be have a new carbon. According to Chachamim, no. The Naziris Tahara not only does not take effect day 7, doesn't even take effect day 8, until you bring your chatas. Only then does your new Nazir start. So even if you became talking day 8, which already shows a heavy carbon, no, you're not going to have a new carbon because you didn't even start a new Nazir yet until you bring your chatas. Now, let's say, however, heavy chatas, let's say bring his carbon chatas, v'nitma and became tamei, and then again, heavy chatas v'nitma, and then again he tries and he becomes tamei again, he becomes tamei. So let's say he touches a mess for some reason. This keeps on happening. Maybe he's going to have to bring a carbon for every single time. And the reason for this is because as as long as you brought your sin offering, even though you didn't bring your guilt offering, there's a few karbanos he brings, Maina, you're going to count Naziras of Tahara, as the Gemara is going to shortly explain the source for their opinion. Another opinion, the third opinion, the Brisa. Rabbi Shmuel B'nai Shabir Membereklaim, he says, no. Kshem Shachatase Aikvasa, just like his Chatas holds him back from starting over his Naziras of Tahara, Kain Hashem Ma'akvai. So to his Asham is Ma'akim, that he's not going to start Naziras Tahara until he brings his Asham. Nigmar again, he's going to explain his opinion also. Okay, we had three different opinions in this Brisa regarding this halacha of being chayiv for a new carbon of Tumah by Naziris, which again is related to when do we start your new Naziris of Tahara. So the Gemara goes through and explains each one of these opinions. I understand the Kohen Rebbe Eliezer, he says that you maschel miyad on day 7 right away you start counting your new Naziris of Tahara. And then of course day 8 right away in the morning if you become Tumah to new chiv of carbon, because I'm a Korah, the pasuk is Bamidbar. Says the Kiddush as Reishay by Yomahu, that he's going to start growing his seed, he's going to sanctify his head on that day. Now, like we said, those words by Yomahu are extra. Didn't have to say by Yomahu. So we said before, that's L'Rabbis by Yom HaShvi, because I know it's day 8. By Yomahu is coming to say something more, day 7. That from day 7, it already starts in the Ziyas Tahar, like we already explained before, according to Eliezer. Now, Taish just explains the next words of the Gemara are a little misleading. When he says, that even though you didn't bring your karbanas, what that means to say is you have to mamash have taste something because it wouldn't make sense. He says, even though it didn't reach the day that's partially fit to bring your karbanas, meaning you're still on day 7. In other words, we brought these same exact words previously in the Gemara according to Rebbe. We said according to Rebbe, what does he do with Bayemahu? He says, oh, that's extra to tell you, now, that, according to Rebbe, means on day 8. Day 8, Mishaher Hayayim, even though you didn't bring your karbanas. But according to Eliezer, it's coming to include day 7. It doesn't mean even though you didn't bring your karbanas, it means even didn't even come to the day that's related to Kabbalah. That's what he's learning from that pasuk. Okay, that's the understanding of Rebbe Eliezer. Rabbanan, what's Pshat and Chachamim? They say like a mitlagan. They say like this, okay, it's only going to start when you bring your chatas, even though you didn't bring your asham. So they say because the word hahu, like we're saying, it's extra words by yemahu. What's hahu? Even though you didn't bring your carbon asham, meaning like Tes explains, even though in general an asham is ma'akiv, like throughout the whole Torah, here the word hahu is telling you, no, that's not going to be ma'akiv from having the Naziris Tahara taking effect. So, in other words, they're limiting. They're saying, Eliezer, calm down. But Yemahu is not going to tell you a whole extra day without any karbanas. No. Generally, you would say you cannot start your new Naziris Tahara, bring all your karbanas. Hahu is saying, it's a limiting term, hahu, this and not something else. On this day, when you have this, you brought just Yichat, it's not the Asham. Okay. Then you can already start Naziris of Tahara. But the last opinion, says the Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel, Ahu Lamali, what does he do with Ahu? What's he coming to include? Because he tells me Nazir's Tahara does not start until you even bring your Asham. So then what are you including from these words by Yemahu? So Amalach, he would tell you, you know what Ahu is teaching you? That even though he didn't bring his oil, there's 3 karbanas the Nazir brings. Chatas, Asham, and oil. And Shmuel is only telling you that, yeah, Chatas, Asham you have to bring. But oil is saying that you don't have to bring. Says Rabbanan. What would they answer to that? If you're limiting, maybe say limited to oila, and maybe you would have to bring asham. Says the Gemara, no, they would tell you oila by me. You don't have to have exclusion to say that this Tahara cannot start without the oila. We know throughout the Shas that it explains that oila is like a gift. Like when you bring a chatz or an oila, it's like chatz is like tone, and the oila is like the gift, saying, oh, thank you, whatever. So of course it's not ma'akiv you nazir Tahara. It's like a gift. It's not a critical part of the atonement. So Tais actually asks, he says, wait a second, so what Pshat Rabbi Shmuel? Chay Rabban is saying very well. How could you say, who is Ma'ir Oila? Ma'ir Oila? Oila is not part of the critical atonement to allow you to resume. Tais says a very interesting answer. He says that in that pasuk, in the Nazir Tameh, Chatas and Oila are written together in the same pasuk. And only then does it say, V'chipa Allah v'kiddush Roisha. So you would have thought to say that even though, yes, generally oil is a gailan, but since the pasuk puts it before the kiddush reishai, So therefore, maybe Nazir's Tahara would not take effect until you bring your Oila also. That's why Ibn Shmuel holds that, Kamash Malan, Hahu, to tell you that even though you did not bring your Oila. And it's logical to say that what we're excluding is the Oila, not the Chat, because L'maisa Chat is the primary atonement. And that Hahu would be excluding the Oila. And then says, Taisis, based on what we're explaining over here, how did the Gemara know previously on our daf to say so pashut according to Rabbi that the word Hahu is coming to include, like we asked, according to Rabbi, what does it do by Yemahu? He says it's day 8, not day 7. What does he do with it? So the Gemara says, yes, it's coming to tell you, even though he didn't bring his karbanos. In other words, once it's already daybreak on the 8th day, his Nizir Star takes effect. How do you know? How do you know to include so much? Maybe he would only include maybe be like Yishmol, you have to be Chatzah Asham, maybe just not Oila. How did the Gemara know to include so much as long as he got to the 8th day? We see all these different Tanoic opinions that say, no, slow down. Even the 8th day, you gotta have Chatas, or maybe even Asham. So how do you know? So that's the Taisis, no, because in his words, Rebbe did not mention anything but B'yoyim Havas HaKarbon. Sounds like he was only particular about the 8th day. Because, yes, he's coming to exclude his disputant, who said it's enough to be at the 7th day. But these Tanoim, they were explaining that the effect of Naziris would be dependent on the Karbanas. Each one according to their own opinions, and therefore we're saying why he says this carbon, he says this carbon. But Rabbi doesn't say anything about Karbanas, mentions just the day, therefore it makes sense, it's the 8th day, and we learn that from Bayemahu, that you don't have to bring your carbon, it's enough just to make it to the 8th day. Now, the Gemara says, we have these 3 different opinions. The Gemara wants to know specific, meaning we had said that the Rabbanan say, okay, what did they do with Hahu? So we explained this even though you don't bring the Asham. But my time I have the Rabbanan. What's the reason? Why did they see fit to tell you that you have to go ahead and bring your Chatas to have your Nazir's Nahar take effect? So at the time I learned the Brisa. The Brisa says, the Pasuk in Midbar. The Pasuk says, that the Hazir Lashem is Yimei Nizra. He takes a ned of Naziris for his days of Naziris, and the Hevi Keves Ben Shanasim La'asham, he brings a lamb in its first year as a Asham, meaning this is when he purifies himself for his Tama. And as the pasuk there ends, Hayom Rishayim Yiplu, the first days that you counted are going to fall away by the wayside, Kitami Nizri, because he made his Naziris Tame. Now, says the Gemara, Ma Tamalema. What is this pasuk telling us that his Naziris is, if you read the pasuk, it sounds like you're saying the Hizla Hashem is Yimei Nizra, you're going to start your Naziris, and then the next words are Vehevi Keves Ben Shanas Asham. It sounds like you're starting your Naziris before you bring your Asham. So says the Gemara, yes, says the Brisa, because since we find generally throughout the Torah that all guilt offerings are ma'akiv, you would think that here also that this Asham would be ma'akiv, as we tin tab of Testament Al. Tamalem, as the pasuk teaches, no. As we just quoted, it says v'heza, and then it says v'hevi, to tell you, yeah, av b'shlehevi, even though you didn't yet bring your carbon Asham, hizah, in other words, your Nazir Nazar would take effect even before you brought your Asham. Now Teresa wants to know, he says, wait a second, didn't you just tell me a moment ago that according to Rabbanan, what do you need Hahu for? And you told me that, Hahu teaches to exclude the Asham. What do you mean? Aren't you learning it out from the Hazel and then says the Hevi? Why do you need both drushes to tell you the same idea? What do you mean by Tamei did Rabbanan? You just told me a second before, it's for Hahu. Says Teresa, no. If not for Hahu, I would have expounded the Hazer to include, even though he didn't bring his oila. That's what I would have said, even though it says the Asham right after. I would have said that it's coming to tell you before the oila. But Asham is ma'akiv. So I needed Hahu, and that the Torah is revealing to us that there's 2 drushes. To tell me the Hazer, even though you don't bring, is even did not bring even the Asham. And if you need both. That's what Taisa explains.
Just that oila is so out of it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's a good question. Right? It sounds like from Taisus that then they maybe would have said not like that. Maybe now that they have both drushes, they're saying that. Yeah, exactly. Good question. What is Taisus saying versus what the Gemara? If it's Derem Alman, I don't need to have exclusion, unless they're saying that like what Taisus said in Rabbi Shmuel. Tastes when you're Yishmael, even as a Dairin, the Pasuk puts it together, and then it says to start Rabbi Naziras. So it sounds like Kiddush Reisha. So then they would have said no. So, but then one is excluding Eilig Derem Alma, and the other one is excluding Asham because of this Pasuk Behez. Now, but the Gemara just finishes off. He that says the Asham is Ma'akim, what does he do with this Pasuk? I mean, he says no. Behez Behev. You know how you translate this Pasuk? Eimasai Hezer. When do you start your counting of Naziris? Is Bizman Shehevi. Is when you go ahead and you bring it. That is when you're going to start it. So it's not telling you even though you don't have it. It's saying the Tanai that's when you're going to be able to bring it. So there was all these different opinions that we had regarding Rabbi Yehuda, regarding B'yam Shvi, that after you spray yourself, that's when it starts. And Eliezer, you have Rebbe who says on the 8th day, even though you did not bring your korbanos, you have the Chacham say day 8, after you brought your chatas, even though you did not bring your asham. And Rabbi Shmuel says day 8, after you bring your chatas and your asham. Thank you to any time for hosting us.